She stood at the same front desk that had dismissed her days earlier, this time not holding a reservation, but the deed to the entire hotel. The receptionist blinked in a stunned silence as Elena Prescott calmly walked past her heels, sharp folder in hand. She wasn't here to check in, she was here to change everything. Hi everyone. Today we're starting with a moment that might sound small until it isn't. A woman with a confirmed hotel reservation walks up to the front desk. She's polite, patient, and well prepared. But she's dismissed, overlooked, and told there's no room. Just moments later, another guest is warmly welcomed. No issue, no questions. Now imagine that woman walking back in the next day, not to ask for a room, but to claim ownership of the entire building. This story isn't about revenge. It's about quiet justice, earned respect, and what happens when someone you underestimated owns the floor beneath your feet. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and what time it is where you are. I always love knowing where my people are listening from. Let's begin. It was a sticky Thursday afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of heat that clings to your skin, the kind that makes even the breeze feel personal. Elena Prescott, age 45, stepped out of a black Lincoln with tinted windows and looked up at the towering limestone exterior of the Haywood Grand. Her sneakers hit the sidewalk with quiet assurance, her carry-on slung over one shoulder. She adjusted her sunglasses and took in the polished gold trim over the entrance like someone memorizing a challenge, not admiring a building. Inside, the lobby shimmered with cold wealth. A crystal chandelier dominated the space, its light bouncing off marble floors. White lilies sat in tall glass vases, scented candles puffed out curated fragrance near the concierge, and a classical string version of a pop song echoed faintly through the air. Elena stepped forward with confidence, stopping at the reception counter. A woman in a perfectly tailored navy blazer name tag reading Kendall looked up. Her lips formed a tight, practiced smile. "Reservation under Janelle Carter," Elena said calmly. Kendall barely glanced at her fingers, tapping the keyboard in deliberately slow motion. Her eyes flicked over Elena's outfit, clean yes, but too casual. Sneakers, no designer bag, no jewelry, screaming pedigree. "One moment," Kendall said, still typing. Elena stood still. She'd been here before. Not this exact hotel, but this exact interaction. The weighted pause, the glance, the decision being made in silence. She could feel it happening again. Kendall finally looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see any reservation under that name." "Are you sure it was today?" Elena calmly reached into her pocket and handed over her phone. The screen showed the confirmation, clear, valid, with the hotel's own logo at the top. Kendall looked at it briefly, then handed it back. "That's strange," she said, her tone unchanged. "We're actually at full capacity tonight. There's a Comfort Inn about 10 minutes away. I can give you their number. No apology, no attempt to solve it, just a redirect. A dismissal." Elena exhaled slowly, her face unreadable. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. She simply said thank you, turned around and walked out. Not a single guest turned to look. No one saw what they just triggered. As she exited, the glass doors gliding open with a mechanical hiss, a new couple walked in behind her, a man in a suit with polished loafers and a woman in a flowing silk dress. Kendall greeted them immediately with warmth, pulling up their reservation. No hiccups, no questions. Elena heard it as she passed the valet. That bright, performative, "Welcome to the Haywood Grand." The car that dropped her off had already gone. She didn't call it back. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Janelle. "They turned me away. Didn't even check properly." A few seconds later, Janelle replied, "Want me to delay tomorrow's meeting?" Elena paused at the intersection, watching a bus rumble by its brakes, squealing. The light changed. She crossed slowly, letting her mind click into place. This wasn't a detour, it was data. "No," she replied. "Let it stand." 15 minutes later, Elena stepped into the Palmetto Inn, a modest 3-story hotel with faded blue shutters and a check-in counter that looked more like a welcome desk in a grandmother's living room. Behind it stood an older woman named Martha, who offered a genuine smile and poured her a glass of cold sweet tea while checking her in. "No trouble at all," Martha said. "We just had a cancellation, lucky timing." Elena nodded, her expression softening just slightly. She took the key, a physical metal one, not a plastic card, and carried her bag up the creaky stairs to the second floor. The room was small but clean. A handmade quilt lay folded on the end of the bed. A Bible rested on the nightstand. She sat on the edge of the mattress, slipped off her sneakers, and finally allowed herself to exhale. Then her phone buzzed again. Acquisition clears at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. You're officially the owner by noon. Elena read it once, then again. She set the phone down beside her and leaned back on the pillows, letting the cool hum of the window unit fan soothe her. They had no idea. Not Kendall, not the couple sipping mimosas in the lobby, not the valet who didn't even glance her way. None of them had any clue that the woman they had dismissed would soon hold the deed to every chandelier and every granite tile beneath their polished shoes. But Elena wasn't angry, not even hurt. She was calm, because what they saw as ordinary was exactly why she did what she did. Because sometimes you don't fight to be seen. You buy the building and decide who gets to feel welcome. The morning sun over Charleston had a way of softening even the hardest intentions. But for Elena Prescott, there was no soft start. She was up before 6, fully dressed by 7, and out the door by 7:30. Gone were the sneakers. In their place, low black leather heels, crisp charcoal suit, white blouse, minimal jewelry. Her braids were pulled back into a tight low bun. She carried no rolling bag, no purse, just a thin leather folder tucked under her arm. She didn't need anything else. The Palmetto Inn's front desk was quiet when she passed it. Martha, still sipping her coffee, waved. "Elena, you're up early." "Got a meeting," she said with a nod. Martha smiled gently. "Hope they know who they're about to meet." Elena gave a polite shrug, not offering more. Then she walked out the front door and into the waiting black Lincoln, which had just pulled up. The same driver from yesterday stepped out to open the door for her. This time he looked her directly in the eye. "Morning, Miss Prescott." She nodded. "Let's go." 10 minutes later, the car pulled up once again to the entrance of the Haywood Grand. Everything looked just as it had the day before. Same manicured hedges, same polished awning, same navy-jacketed doormen posted like statues. But today there was no hesitation in her step. She didn't glance at the facade. She walked straight through the revolving glass doors and into the lobby with a purpose that shifted the air. Kendall was at the front desk again, speaking on the phone while typing. She didn't look up. Not yet. Just past the concierge desk stood a tall man in a tailored gray suit, James Hartford, lead legal counsel for Prescott and Moore Holdings. He spotted her, step forward, and nodded with quiet precision. "Ms. Prescott, welcome. Your team is already in the executive lounge." "Good." As they walked past the check-in counter, Elena didn't slow. Kendall glanced up from her call and froze mid-sentence. Her eyes met Elena's for a fraction of a second, and the confusion that flickered there said everything. Elena didn't offer so much as a smirk. No wave, no words, just a calm, steady stride. Upstairs, the executive lounge had already been prepped. Amina from operations sat beside two analysts reviewing the transition file. On the long oak conference table were 5 copies of the acquisition documents neatly stacked and waiting. "Any updates?" Elena asked. James slid the paperwork toward her. "Final lien cleared at 7:50 a.m. All signatures are in. Bank letter of ownership transition has been delivered. You sign these, and the Haywood Grand is officially yours." Elena sat open the top folder and began to read, not because she didn't trust her team, but because she believed in anchoring herself in the moment. With each line, she absorbed what she was taking on. Not just a building, a system, a culture, an opportunity. She signed 5 times her pen strokes, deliberate and steady. No flourish, no hesitation. With each signature, the building below them shifted hands, not with ceremony, but with precision. Not with applause, but with accountability. James gathered the documents, tapped them into a folder, and nodded. "Congratulations, Ms. Prescott. You now own every square inch of this place." Elena didn't smile. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the valet circle. The same doorman from yesterday stood there guiding traffic. The same front desk receptionist was likely still trying to process what she'd just seen. Behind her, Amina spoke. "Do you want to meet with the general manager this morning or let him wait?" Elena checked her watch. 10 o'clock. No earlier. Let him sweat. She turned away from the glass and walked calmly to the hallway. The team knew what that meant. Elena's first destination wasn't a boardroom. It was the heart of the hotel. The hallways were quiet, lined with generic artwork and overpriced sconces that looked expensive, but gave off barely enough light. She walked past the elevators, past the spa entrance, past the overpriced boutique. Then she entered the staff wing. The energy changed instantly, less polish, more honesty. The scent of coffee from the break room drifted out, mixed with the faint smell of bleach and laundry steam. A porter pushing a cart nearly bumped into her and stopped short. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you?" Name Elena asked. The man blinked. Marcus. Marcus Bell. "I'm on guest services. You like it here, Marcus?" He hesitated. "It's, all right. Pays on time. Management don't bother us if we stay quiet." Elena nodded slowly. "That's about to change. You'll hear more Monday. But know this, if something's broken, I expect someone like you to be the first to say so. Start keeping a list." He blinked again. "Yes, ma'am." Further down the hallway, she stepped into the laundry room, warm, loud, and filled with motion. Folding tables were covered in sheets. A short woman with silver-streaked hair and calloused hands was sorting towels like she'd done it every day for the last 30 years. "Ma'am," she asked when she noticed Elena. "Lydia." "Yes," the woman said, standing straight. "I read your file. 28 years here, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Do you enjoy the work?" Lydia didn't hesitate. "I don't mind the folding. I just wish the carts didn't jam every other hour and the vents didn't back up every summer." Elena nodded. "Those repairs are approved as of today. You'll also have an extra set of hands by next week. And if I have my way, a raise?" Lydia's eyes widened. I'm Elena Prescott. I own this place now." Lydia's face didn't light up with shock. It settled into a quiet smile of understanding. "Well, it's about time someone like you showed up." Elena turned and headed toward the kitchens next. No warning, no announcement. The smell of garlic and onions hit first. Then the clatter of pots, the hiss of steam. She stepped inside and was immediately noticed. "Who's she?" someone whispered. The head chef, Ralph Gutierrez, emerged from behind the walk-in fridge. He was built like a linebacker, tattoos on both forearms, and a towel tossed over one shoulder. "You're not a vendor," he said, squinting. "No," Elena replied. "I'm the reason your dry goods order was on time today." Ralph paused. "Prescott Holdings." She nodded. "You here to make a bunch of changes?" "Yes." He crossed his arms. "Just don't mess with the food quality. I don't care what brand the butter is. I care how the people making it feel when they walk through the back door." He watched her for a moment, then gave a slow, grudging nod. "Fair." Elena left the kitchen and made her way back upstairs, her pace still calm. At 9:59 a.m., she walked into the executive conference room. A few seconds later, the door opened. Gregory Martin, general manager of the Haywood Grand, entered. Late 50s, gold cufflinks, a tie that probably cost more than the folding table in the break room. He walked over with a rehearsed smile. "Ms. Prescott, a pleasure." "Is it?" Elena asked evenly. "Let's find out." They sat. "We'll ensure a smooth transition," Gregory said quickly. "I've informed the department heads to stand by. Of course my staff is loyal." "You mean they're afraid of losing their jobs?" she interrupted. "That's not loyalty. That's survival." He cleared his throat. "Well, yes, there's been change anxiety." "There should be," Elena said calmly. "We're going to start with audits. HR shift logs, onboarding procedures, and complaints, especially around the front desk." Gregory blinked. Elena leaned forward. "I don't expect perfection, but I do expect honesty." He tried to recover. "Of course, I'm confident we can bring things up to your standards." She stood. "That depends on whether you know what standards really are." Elena didn't waste her breath on dramatic speeches. She let her presence make the first statement and her systems make the second. By 11:15 a.m., the audit requests had been delivered quietly, formally, with zero room for misinterpretation. Every department head received a sealed folder with specific instructions. Shift logs, employee evaluations, guest complaint patterns, and service inconsistencies were all to be submitted by the next business day. No exceptions. The hotel staff buzzed quietly behind the scenes. The executive suite, usually a refuge for upper management, became a logistics base. Elena moved through it all like a silent force, her heels echoing across marble floors, her mind collecting more than her words revealed. At 12:40 p.m., she sat alone in her office, newly cleared out and freshly painted in soft gray tones. The desk was minimal. No personal photos, no scented candles, just a leather planner, her laptop, and a glass of ice water. Jonelle, her assistant, knocked once and entered with a tablet in hand. "Kendall's file," she said. Elena accepted it and began reading. No formal HR complaints, but a disturbing pattern in the guest feedback. Forms words like curt, dismissive, cold, and selective appeared more than once. Not enough to trigger corporate attention before, but now it mattered. "She's not the only one," Janelle said, reading her tone. "No, but she's the one who gave me a perfect case study." Elena didn't want her fired. She wanted her retrained and watched. The next morning, Elena rolled out her first initiative. A printed booklet titled "Value Before Vanity" was placed in every employee mailbox and handed out during shift changes. The cover was plain white with dark navy text and no flashy logos. Inside it read, "Dignity is not a perk, it's the price of entry. You don't have to earn it to be treated like a human being. You just have to show up." Underneath was a table of contents that outlined the new training structure: 3 phases. Listening to learn, speaking with intention, correcting without harm. Every employee would complete it, no exceptions. Kendall arrived at the HR office that morning thinking it was a standard check-in. Instead, she was met by Elena herself. "I want to be clear," Elena began. "This isn't a termination meeting. It's a calibration one." Kendall looked confused but nodded. "You remember me from 2 days ago?" A slow, embarrassed pause. "Yes. You dismissed me in under 30 seconds. I had a confirmed reservation. I was polite. I didn't escalate. But you still made a decision. Can you tell me why?" Kendall opened her mouth, then closed it. "I wasn't dressed for the part," Elena offered. "Didn't speak with the right accent. Didn't come with the right kind of luggage." Kendall's face flushed. "I didn't mean to, but you did. And the problem isn't that you made a mistake. The problem is that the mistake was predictable." Kendall looked down. "So here's what's going to happen. You're entering the training program starting Monday. 3 evaluations over 60 days. You'll shadow senior concierge staff. You'll be observed without knowing when. And you'll be reviewed based on how people feel, not how fast you check them in." Kendall's voice was barely audible. "You're giving me a second chance," Elena stood. "No, I'm giving the guests who come after me a better first chance." By the end of the week, something began to shift. Not loudly, not with banners or slogans, but with the kind of subtle difference that can only be felt. The folding tables in the laundry room were replaced with height-adjustable models. Lydia noticed immediately. "First time my back's not aching before lunch," she said, rubbing her wrist and smiling to herself. Marcus in guest services was asked to help design a new guest feedback form. "You mean actually put in my ideas?" he asked, Janelle, stunned. "Yes," she said. "We want to know what happens between the marble and the mattresses." Even Chef Ralph noticed his supply deliveries arrived on time. "Somebody finally paid the damn invoice," he muttered, checking the produce. He didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either. That was progress. Elena didn't walk around with a clipboard. She didn't call team huddles or clap her hands in the hallway. She did something more radical. She listened. Every day at 3:00 p.m., she left her office door open for exactly 30 minutes. No appointment required. No titles needed. Anyone could walk in and say what they needed to say. Terrence, the new hire from night maintenance, was the first to knock. He sat stiffly, at first unsure if it was a trap. "I just wanted to say," he began, "it already feels different. People breathing easier. Like we're not waiting to get blamed for stuff we didn't even do." Elena didn't nod. She just let the moment land. 3 days later, Lydia came in not to complain, but to bring her a folded thank you note from 2 other laundry workers. "No one's ever asked what we needed. That's new." By the end of week 2, the Haywood Grand didn't just look like a luxury hotel. It started feeling like a real one, where people could actually relax without pretending to be something they weren't. And Kendall. She was learning. Slowly. During one shadow session, she hesitated when a guest walked in, wearing overalls and a faded baseball cap. She opened with her usual stiff tone, then caught herself, reset, welcomed him properly, even offered to help with his luggage. Elena watched from behind a column. No grin, just a quiet nod to herself. It wasn't about punishing Kendall. It was about recalibrating the very system that taught her to make that kind of decision in the first place. At a staff meeting the following Monday, Elena spoke briefly. Her words were few, but they landed like anchors. I don't care how nice our chandeliers are. If people walk out of here feeling unseen, we've failed. This hotel doesn't get to shine on the outside while staying hollow on the inside. The room was still. No one clapped. They just listened. And in that silence, the shift continued. 3 weeks later, the Haywood Grand looked the same on the outside. Same ornate balconies, same sleek glass entryway, same scripted gold lettering above the doors. But the soul of the building had begun to rearrange itself quietly, deliberately, like bones resetting beneath the surface. It started with the guests. A couple from out of town, clearly road-weary with wrinkled t-shirts and a fraying backpack checked in one rainy afternoon. Kendall was behind the desk. She paused when they stepped up, glancing briefly at their shoes and their damp hair. Then, like a muscle she'd learned to control, she smiled genuinely. Welcome to the Haywood Grand, she said. Reservation under which name? The couple looked relieved, not surprised, just relieved. Later that day, Elena stood at the back of the ballroom as staff finished stringing up warm lights from the ceiling. Rows of chairs were being arranged in a crescent, not the usual stiff rows. No centerpieces, no marble podium, just simple, honest beauty. The hotel's first community rising fundraiser was about to begin. The idea had come from Jonelle, and Amina proposed one morning over coffee. What if we hosted a scholarship dinner, Amina had asked. Local kids, hospitality, culinary, small business dreams. No pomp, just purpose. Elena agreed without hesitation and then funded the entire event herself, quietly. No media press releases, no photo ops, just hand-delivered invitations to every high school, small business, and community center within a 15-mile radius. By 6:30 p.m., the ballroom was full. Teenagers in mismatched dress shoes sat beside retired teachers. A grandfather in a Vietnam vet hat shook hands with a poet from North Charleston. The hotel's head chef, Ralph, personally oversaw a menu that included both crabs, stuffed mushrooms, and mac and cheese with bacon crumble. And at the door, greeting each guest with practiced warmth, was Lydia. She had asked, no insisted on volunteering. I want to see what it looks like, she'd said, when the lights are pointed at the people instead of the chandeliers. Elena stood in a simple charcoal dress, arms crossed at the back wall, watching it all unfold. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Renee just arrived. Nervous. Where do I go? Elena smiled softly and texted back, look for Lydia, then look for me. Renee was 18, shy, thin-framed. A borrowed sweater dress hugged her narrow shoulders, and the boots she wore were clearly half a size too big. Her hair was pinned back with drugstore clips, and her lip gloss had been applied in the rearview mirror of her aunt's car. But her eyes, they burned with something Elena recognized instantly. Hunger, not for food, not for attention, but for space, for the right to take up room without apology. Elena found her near the refreshment table, half hiding behind a potted plant. You made it, she said softly. Renee turned startled. Miss Prescott, sorry, I didn't know if I should breathe, Elena interrupted gently. No one here's checking your shoes. That earned a laugh. Nervous, but real. They talked for 10 minutes before anyone noticed them. Renee clutching a folder of notes, Elena asking questions, and nodding without interruption. I want to study hospitality, Renee whispered, but not just to manage. I want to own places like this. One day. Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze. You ever been in a place like this before? Renee shook her head. Always thought they were for people who looked different than me. Elena smiled. So did I. Later that evening, someone handed Elena a microphone. There was no official agenda for speeches, but the room had quieted the way rooms do when they realize they're part of something bigger than a meal. She stepped onto the low stage. No spotlight, no cue music. She simply spoke. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, she began. My mother was a school custodian. My father fixed carburetors in our garage. I didn't grow up around chandeliers or silk napkins, but I grew up around hard work, quiet work, work that people pretend not to see until they need it. The room listened. Even the kitchen staff had stepped into the doorway. I didn't build a company so I could sit in corner offices and smile through gala dinners. I built it because I got tired of being the invisible one in every fancy room I walked into. And I swore if I ever owned one of those rooms, I'd make sure the next person like me didn't have to fight just to be seen. Silence. Then soft, steady applause. She didn't stay on stage. She handed the mic back and returned to the edge of the room, where she belonged, close enough to touch the change, far enough to let others lead it. At one point in the night, Marcus, the porter who once flinched when she walked through the staff hallway, approached her with a quiet grin. "You see the mayor's here?" he asked. Elena glanced across the room. The mayor was indeed shaking hands, posing for a photo, chatting animatedly. "I saw. He's acting like he planned all this." Elena sipped her iced tea. "Let him. We know who did the work." Marcus grinned wider. "Glad I stuck around." "I'm glad you spoke up when I asked you to." As the event wound down, the guests began trickling out. Some left thank you notes. Others shook hands with the staff. And many more than anyone expected asked when the next event would be. In the hallway outside the ballroom, Elena found Renee again. The young woman's hands were shaking slightly as she held her binder. I, I took notes," Renee said. Would you ever, I mean, would you ever consider mentoring someone like me?" Elena didn't hesitate. "I already am." They exchanged numbers, no promises, no selfies, just a shared understanding between two women, one who had carved out space and one who was just learning how to claim it. Later that night, as the final tables were cleared and Lydia carefully folded the guest list by hand to save it, Elena stood in the now empty ballroom. She looked around at the walls, at the floor that had once rejected her without even knowing who she was. Now it didn't need to know her name to know her impact, because something had shifted and it was only beginning. The next morning at the Haywood Grand, everything looked ordinary. The lobby lights glowed. The espresso machine hissed behind the cafe counter. Guests wheeled suitcases past the front desk, and the cleaning carts rolled quietly through the hallways. But beneath the polished surface, something essential had changed, and not just in systems, in spirit. Elena Prescott sat in her office with the blinds open, letting the early sunlight stream across her desk. The warmth felt earned. She wasn't checking emails. She wasn't signing contracts. She was sitting in the stillness, reflecting. When she first stepped into this building, she was invisible. Not in title, not in worth, but in the ways that most people measure value at a glance. Now, she wasn't just visible, she was leading. Not loudly, not performatively, but with presence, consistency, and unwavering clarity. Downstairs, Marcus was checking in a couple from Tennessee, an older black woman and her grandson. They were here for his college visit, and Marcus made sure they had the quietest room on the third floor, close to the elevator. He even slipped them 2 bottles of cold water and a map to the local soul food spot. At the front desk, Kendall was mid-shift. She'd just wrapped up her second week of training with Phuong Tran, a seasoned hospitality veteran Elena had flown in from New Orleans. Phuong didn't smile much, but she carried dignity in every syllable. And she didn't tolerate shortcuts, not with language, not with service, not with people. That morning, Kendall stood a little straighter. She greeted each guest with steady warmth, not that overly sweet voice she used to put on like a costume, but something quieter, more sincere. When an elderly man walked in wearing cargo shorts and a fishing hat, she smiled without a blink. "Welcome to the Haywood Grand, sir. Do you have a reservation, or would you like me to help you book a room?" No glance at his shoes, no hesitation. From the second-floor landing, Elena watched it happen. That one sentence might have seemed small, but it was everything. Behind the scenes, new rituals were already forming. In the break room now painted a cheerful cream, with navy blue trim, the old microwave had been replaced. The couch, once ripped and sagging, was now plush and firm. A coffee pot brewed continuously, and a whiteboard listed team shout-outs each week. This week, Lydia, for managing linen for 300-plus guests without a single complaint. Terrence, for fixing the jam door before anyone even called it in. Elena hadn't written those notes. The staff had, and that was the point. They were seeing each other. Every Thursday, Elena still held her 3:00 p.m. open office. That day, Minda, the oldest employee in laundry, stepped in. She didn't sit. She just popped her head in and said, "That new folding table, best thing to happen to my back in 10 years. Appreciate it." Elena smiled. "Glad it helps." Minda gave a thumbs up. "And hey, I got an idea for a staff board. Photos and bios, so guests can know who's been keeping this place clean for years." Elena didn't blink. "Do it." Full support. By Monday, that board was up mounted behind the front desk. Photos of longtime staff, a short bio next to each. No titles, just names, stories, humanity. Guests stopped to read them. Kids pointed at them. One man from Ohio took a picture of it and said, "I wish my company back home did this." That afternoon, Elena met Renee at the rooftop cafe. The girl was already seated, binder open, color-coded tabs sticking out in every direction. Her eyes were focused, but her hands trembled just a little. She stood when Elena approached. "You don't have to stand," Elena said, easing into the chair across from her. "I just didn't want to mess this up," Renee said. "You won't," Elena replied. "You're here. That's already halfway." They went through Renee's questions, everything from licensing to vendor contracts to how to structure staff meetings. Elena didn't sugarcoat anything. She answered in full and truth with examples from her own career. When they reached the end of the binder, Renee closed it and whispered, "I never thought I'd be allowed in a place like this." Elena paused, set down her tea, and leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't either," she said. "I had to make space." Renee looked confused. "Make space?" "Yeah," Elena said. "You don't wait for people to open the door. You buy the building, change the locks, and decide who gets welcome next." That sentence hung between them like a truth Renee had always known, but never had the words for. Her eyes glistened. She didn't cry, but she nodded once, deep and slow. The Haywood Grand wasn't perfect. It still had scuffed tiles in one hallway. The elevator on the north wing still made a weird ding that no one could figure out. And someone still kept leaving half-used packs of ketchup in the staff fridge. But something fundamental had shifted. The building no longer ran on image. It ran on identity. By the time evening fell and the last guest checked in, Elena had returned to her office. She sat at her desk, picked up a pen, and began writing a note on hotel letterhead. It would be pinned to the staff board the next morning. "To the Haywood Grand team. This place used to shine on the outside while staying hollow on the inside. But now it breathes. That's because of you. Keep making people feel like they belong here, not just because it's your job, but because it's your space too. You matter. You're seen. You're not temporary. EP." She signed it with a sharp, elegant stroke, then folded it in half and slid it into her notebook. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more stories, more work. But tonight she let the stillness hold her. No noise, no calls, no fires to put out. Just the quiet knowledge that justice didn't have to shout to be heard. Some stories don't end with a grand applause or a news headline. Some end in quiet rooms, soft lights, and the feeling that something somewhere has shifted for the better. That's what this story's about. Not punishment, not revenge, but realignment. One woman walked into a building that didn't see her and chose not to rage, but to reshape. And in doing so, she didn't just change policies. She changed people. We all walk through spaces every day, hotels, offices, stores, schools, and some of those spaces make us feel small without even trying. Not because they're evil, but because they've forgotten who they're supposed to serve. What Elena Prescott did was simple but radical. She didn't make a scene. She made a standard. She proved that power doesn't have to announce itself with shouting or ego. Sometimes it walks in calmly, listens more than it speaks, and lets respect do the heavy lifting. So here's the question I'll leave you with. What kind of spaces are you helping create? In your workplace, your home, your community? Are people just getting through the day? Or are they breathing easier because you made room for them? Because the legacy we leave behind isn't in buildings or logos. It's in the people who remember how they felt in the rooms we led. And the truth is, anyone can buy the chandelier, but not everyone knows how to light up a soul.